Welcome to the Expert Speaker Podcast. We have Fernando Nunes, like tunes,
Tunes with an N. Yes, sir.
sales veteran, real estate veteran, coach to extraordinary real estate professionals, helping to increase sales and the all important mindset. Let's dive in, Fernando.
Thanks, Majeed.
Give us the backstory. And I know you had a brush with poverty. So I wanted to
Yeah.
touch on that because I wonder how your mind has changed about money. I love talking about money mindset, relationship with money.
Mhm.
So you're welcome to start all the way back at the beginning. So how did things begin for you, and how did you get into sales and real estate?
Yeah. So they began for me on a cold December night. I actually don't remember if it was cold or not, but I presume so because it was December. But no, like I was born into a family, couple of immigrant parents, and as a lot of immigrants do, they come here, they work hard. Um, my background is Portuguese. I would say that people don't know this, but Portugal was actually under a dictatorship until like the 70s, right? So what happens is you grow up without an understanding of money yourself. And so, as we know, when you kind of grow up that way, you don't develop the mindset around it yourself. You don't know how to use it. You're afraid of it. People are always talking negatively about it. So that's how I grew up, right? Grew up with parents who couldn't pay their bills. I remember, cable and utilities getting shut off sometimes and whatnot. And then, my parents split up, single mom, my sister, myself living in a one-bedroom apartment at one point, the three of us together. So, you go through it all, government housing, going to the food bank to get food. And so as you grow up with this, one of the things that's I've become aware of later on in life is when I say poor people, I say it respectfully. But when we're raised that way, we're also taught to not talk about money. You don't ask your parents how much they make or how much they have or how much things cost. You just don't ask for things and you be respectful of it. And one of the biggest differences is that as I started to grow and mature, and I saw the people who were doing well financially around me, they were incredibly comfortable talking about money,
Hmm.
right?
Interesting. Okay, question. Did
Yeah,
you call yourself poor? Did you say we're poor?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And
So
I
you,
felt it every day.
uh-huh. Okay. So you grew up poor. You knew you were poor. You
Yeah.
you called yourself poor. Don't talk about money compared to the people you considered rich. We're freely talking about money.
Yes.
So was there a day where you thought, okay, I'm not poor anymore?
That's a great question. Um, I don't think there was ever a moment of realization that I'm not. Things just became easier, right? I stopped having to ask for help with my bills on a week to week basis, right? Oh, my insurance is coming out in the morning. Going to my mom and being like, can you lend me $50 just so I make sure that this doesn't bounce tonight? And then tomorrow or 2 days from now when I get paid, I will pay you back, right? It was a payday management problem where I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't learn. Well, it's not that I didn't learn. I learned, but I wasn't doing a good enough job. And when you're just cutting it so close, it's hard to take that step to get ahead because any little bump throws you off the track. And then there was just this point where I, had done well enough. There's actually 2 points in my life where I'd done well enough that it was okay. Early on in my career, when I was in sales, um, back in like 2012, I was making over $100,000 a year in sales, which at that time was decent money. Um, and so I was okay then. And then you fast forward again, and I'd kind of hit this point again where I no longer was concerned about my bills. There was just money in the bank all the time, and I was fine. I was comfortable. But there was no moment of realization because the fear always still existed. What if this goes away tomorrow? Right?
Yeah.
What if something else comes up and I can't afford that? And it was just over time where I started to realize, like, no, I'm actually okay. I have extra money to do things, with my family, with my kids, go on vacations and do things like that again. And so there's a release of stress, of fear that comes
Mhm.
from that. And then as I continued to work on my own mindset and my own relationship with money there, and started to talk more about it, And it was important to me to educate my kids so they didn't grow up the same way that I did, right? With a fear of it. So we've talked about it probably ad nauseum, right? Like they probably hit points where like, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Um,
How do you guide your children to not be worried about money?
it's just teaching. It's just teaching from the very beginning. I taught them, hey, as you earn, first of all, I taught them you shouldn't ever want a job, right? You should want to do something that you love to do yourself. We're gonna learn how to make money in other ways so you don't have to worry where the money comes from, so you can do what you love and the money will come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
We've talked about once they did start earning money, how much, put this away, put this amount away, live off this amount, right? Keep this for spending, keep a
Uh-huh.
short-term savings, keep a long-term savings. So it's just all those like things that honestly our education system should be teaching our kids and they don't. Just how to be respectful of it, how to appreciate it, how to not be fearful of it, how to manage it. And it's become such a thing that my kids now talk to me about it, right? My daughter gets paid and she's like, I have this much in the bank. That's good, right? I'm like, yes, yes, you're doing the right
Fantastic.
things.
Fantastic. My kids think we're rich because I often say the phrase, good thing I'm rich. That's one of the things I learned to
Mhm.
say when a big came. I'm like, instead of going, a big bill, I go, ooh, good thing I'm rich. But the other day,
Oh,
I took them to buy Pokemon cards at the store up the street here. And they both whipped out like $60 and turned $60 into I don't know how many Pokemon cards, but I was beside myself. I was like, oh no, I'm failing you, children. You're losing your money. And so the children are always a mirror for our own inner thoughts, right? And so I can still see it when I see my kids spending money in a way that I'm like, well, that's not a good use of your money, 8-year-old kid. um So neat that we can attempt to teach the kids from the wisdom that you've gleaned. So how'd you get into the real estate business?
so again, we talk about going back and not having much, but watching the people that did, right? So even people within my own family who it felt like they were well off. You go to their house, it looked nice and they could renovate it and they just seemed comfortable and that's where it started. And you start to talk to them or just appreciate and understand their lives and realize, oh, they have rental properties. And somewhere in my mind, subconsciously, I think I attached the two. And then as I grew, a little older, I started to recognize that more and more. The more people that seemed like they were comfortable in life had real estate in some way. And so then I had this natural interest, probably because when I was young, I, thought maybe I'd never be able to own a house. And so I developed this fascination with it. And so started off early. I bought my first house when I was like 23 years old. And it was just like a live-in fix-up, right? I didn't know it was a flip. It wasn't meant to be a flip. I just moved in. I made things better. I sold it for more money. Did that for a while. And then it wasn't until probably 4 or 5 years ago where I actually started um, teaching myself more, educating myself, looking around me, and realizing that the difference between being a landlord or a property owner and an investor is in how you look at it, how you approach it every day. It's a business, right?
Hmm.
But at this point, I already had, over 20 years of experience in kind of the business world and whatnot. So I looked at problems very differently. And so I was like, this is it. This is what I got to do. I knew I wanted to do it. Some bumps along the way earlier on in my life, again, around money, right? But it was as I started to work on the mindset part of it more and I really released that fear of money, of poverty, that I was able to start taking action moving forward and actually making this real.
Hmm. So now you help real estate professionals increase sales. A lot of it's mindset. What are you seeing out there that gets real estate professionals stuck at a certain level, and sort of what's keeping people stuck, and what do you think is necessary to break through to higher levels of income?
I've had the good fortune of starting in business from the time I was realistically like 16 years old. I started doing telemarketing when I was like 16 years old. That was my introduction to sales. In my entire life, I've managed restaurants. I grew into like outbound sales and then sales leadership and business leadership. And literally my entire life, I've been around sales or business and business growth. So I've had some amazing mentors. I've had world-class training from world-class companies, right? And there's a point you take that for granted because you're like, how do other people not see this stuff? How do they not get it? Because again, you don't realize it's been part of your life. So as we moved into this space, started having more conversations with people and recognizing that in the real estate space, whether you're a real estate agent, an investor, property manager, it could be anything else, you've probably come from a different walk of life, right? Maybe you were a teacher before, maybe you were an engineer, maybe you worked in restaurants, doesn't matter, but you don't necessarily have the exposure that I've had. And so what I find they most get stuck in are the simple lessons that I've learned along the way, right? Like in sales, one of the big things that I learned a long time ago that got me over this fear of not even fear, but this block of like selling big ticket items to people. It's not my money, right? So when you think about it, like
Okay.
let's say you're
Okay.
selling, go ahead, go ahead.
Mindset nugget number one. It's not my money. What does that mean?
Yeah. The value of things is different to different people and different businesses at different
Uh-huh.
stages, right? And it's the value of the cost that is actually more important to the purchaser than the dollar amount. So
Okay.
an example that I give in that is like there was one company that I was working with that REITs were one of our customers, right? Like they own all the malls in Canada and some of them in the US and whatnot. So we go in and we talk about an item that's $20,000 to the salesperson who's dealing with that. Like, oh, $20,000. Oh my gosh, like I don't know. I'm giving them a quote for like five of these things. It's $100,000. Oh, who's going to spend $100,000 on this? There's no way. There's no way this sale is going to close. In reality, that mall spends $100,000 to tile one of their corridors. It's literally nothing to them. It makes no difference. Are they going to look at where that
Mhm.
money is being spent and make sure it's a good return? Absolutely. But it's not a lot of money, right? I used to sell public radio or public safety radio systems. They would buy one radio worth $7,000. That means nothing to them because if they bought the $500 radio, they would break it 18 times. So they buy the $5,000 radio. There's all the things that they need. And
Mhm.
so, like, it's not my money. And the value that the purchaser has or places on it is actually way more important, right? So in real estate, when we look at that, it's the same thing. It's like, what is the value that you're bringing as that investor that you're bringing, maybe a capital partner, or as that real estate agent that you're delivering to your client? It is not about what is this going to cost them. It is about what value is this going to bring them.
Mhm.
How do they appreciate the money they're spending?
So it's not my money means I'm not the one buying this.
Right.
So it's not my perspective of if it's worth it or what I value it or whether that's a lot of money to me.
Right.
It's the other person's money, the
Yep.
buyer's money,
Yep.
and the price or the cost is not the focus. The
Right.
focus is the value. And
Right.
of course, the price will be lower than the value. So they'll be
Yep.
happy with the exchange.
Yep. Correct.
Got got
Correct.
it.
If you're dealing with someone who makes $500,000 a year, $200,000 a year, and you make 50, $50 is a lot to you. They probably would forget where they spent $50 last week.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even occur to them, right? So the value of money is very different to different people.
Yeah. Cool. Um, what other wisdom can you share about sales? What do you find a lot of people are getting wrong that you can make a few adjustments and they do a lot better?
I think sometimes people don't realize, again, talk about value, the value of the networks that they sit on or the value of the knowledge that they already have, right? And what it is that they bring to the other partner, right, that they're
Hmm.
working with. A good
Hmm.
example is I recently met someone who has been a real estate agent for 20 plus years, part time,
Hmm.
and they also have a full time job. And now this person is like sitting there talking to me, and they're like, oh, the real estate market's so hard and it's so competitive, and I don't know if people are buying. What about interest rates? And I don't even know where I can go find leads. I'm so busy at my day job. How do I go and find, people to work with when I'm not working? I'm so bad. And it's like, well, hold on. So first of all, stop saying you don't have time to do this. The reality is you don't make time to do this, because if it was important enough to you to make real estate successful, you would find the time, right? So that's one. But two, based on the job this person did, so they worked for a logistics company that has drivers driving around literally everywhere. I'm like, you have an entire network of people at your disposal. You are sitting on a literal gold mine, right? Of people at your disposal to drive around, find the houses that look like maybe they are in the market to sell. They get to know the people who they're delivering packages to. They build a personal relationship with them. What if you turn these people into a fleet of salespeople for you, where they're generating leads? If they're able to bring this person on as a client, you'll pay them a small fee, right? For the thank you to send the client your way. Now you don't have to be the one out doing all this calling. You have people that are out there that you work with on a day-to-day basis anyways, that are actually bringing you the information. Have the leads come to you, and you don't have to go and chase them, right? So it's sometimes the ability to sit and look around you, and what do I already have at my disposal? I don't
Mhm.
have to go out and do more. I just have to take advantage of what I already have. And a lot of people don't see that, right? And that's what when I talk about the coaching side of it, that's where I'm leveraging my experience in business of finding these small nuggets, right?
Yeah.
To help them find their gold mine.
Yeah. Interesting you ended with the word gold mine, because I was just thinking about what's sitting here in this drawer next to me. I have a shoebox full of business cards. When I first came to Canada, I was networking like crazy.
Mhm.
And I always think of that shoebox of business cards as my gold mine.
Mhm.
And probably once a year, I pull it out and I just go through and just remember all these people. And I always think to myself, if I ever needed a job, if I ever needed help, these guys would back me up.
Yep.
Or, there's probably so much opportunity in this box full of cards. Um, and yet my brain will sometimes tell me, you need leads, you need something, but it's like, don't forget you got a gold mine.
Mhm.
So that's good to remember.
What just to jump in real quick there, we were at an event recently, because you're
Yeah.
talking about your old leads, right? And there was a gentleman who showed up who you had an interaction with how many years ago?
Oh, that was awesome. Yeah.
Right? And this dude shows up like years later because he saw you
Yeah.
post something. He's like, hey, I'm doing this thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what an impact, right?
Yeah. This guy, I taught a class for him 13 years ago. He was working at a company that I was doing a class,
Yeah.
and back then, before QR codes, I would ask everybody to give me their name, email, and phone number,
Mhm.
because I knew the value of a long-term relationship. And I would manually enter into my database letter by letter with my fingers. Um, and sometimes I would misspell the email, or, I can't read, is that a 7 or is that a 1? Um, but I'm sure that's how that guy got on my email list, is with pen, paper, and me typing. And that would have been 13 years ago. And so since then, I've sent 1,000 emails or more to my list, and never once have I heard from him. But I put the offer, right time, right place, and here we are.
There he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you
And there
for
he is. So
reminding me
that's
of that.
you tapping into your gold mine, right? Like, but that was you
Yeah.
initially finding your gold mine early, that gold mine or those nuggets being those leads, and then you just continuing the point of contact.
Yeah.
And eventually it comes through. And I think sometimes people don't realize that, like, as long as you're showing up every day and doing the right things and providing that value, people will find you again.
Yeah. Now, I've heard the references of there's farming and there's hunting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And farming is like, you're planting your seeds, you're watering your seeds.
Right.
And that's what I would call my network, my relationship is like
Mhm.
just, sprinkling value here with my social media and my emails. And whenever they're ready, they'll just respond to one of my offers.
Right.
And then there's hunting where it's like, hey, the tribe is hungry. We need food to
Yep.
eat. We gotta bring home something. So what do you have to say to someone who says, Fernando, I need to make sales. I need it now. It's urgent. I can't wait for slow procurement processes, and I'll get back to you next week. Because I know also that can be desperate,
Yep.
and desperation ain't helping either. So, what's the mindset and what's the strategy where it's like the stomach is grumbling? We got to bring in the cash now without coming across desperate.
So the answer to that is probably unpopular, which is you have to still like you can't. There's a mistake I see people do all the time in sales, right? They get this big win, they take their foot off the gas.
Mm,
And that's when they hit this value where they're like, oh, now I gotta go and I gotta hunt again and I gotta get out. The reason to me that so there's a hunt and the hunter and farmer analogy is a good one because there are things that I love and hate about that. Because to me, I was a farmer hunter,
hmm.
right? And what that meant is I was always nurturing my relationships. Always. I was always trying to provide value. I always cared what the person was trying to do. I was never trying to force a sale on anyone.
Hmm.
I was always like, what do you need? Understand it well. Here's what I can deliver you. I can definitely bring you the best value. Here's the reason why. And sometimes you're going to lose on price or lose for other things, and that's okay, right? You're not going to win 100% of the time. But it was always ready. So what that meant is when it was time for me to go out and close something, I already knew the value to bring that person that would make a difference, that would move the needle for them to have them move today, to have them take action today on something they needed to do because I already knew what they needed. So I'd already been nurturing that relationship. I'd already been farming that relationship, if you will, right? And so when it came time, I knew how to take it down. I knew how to approach them and say, hey, I know you've been looking for this. I know you've been needing this. Here's what I can
Yeah,
do. Here's what I
yeah,
have. And the
yeah,
time is now, right?
yeah.
And so it's always being ready. It's always being ready.
So, in other words, the fast money can come from people who already trust you.
That's where the fastest money comes from.
Yeah,
Doing
yeah,
a cold call and starting from the beginning, can you force someone into something? Maybe. Probably won't be the right thing, right? And you've probably lost them over the long term.
yeah,
And that's very transactional. And that leads to that's why I think people that you see who like churn in the industry quite a bit, they're bouncing from this place to that place to that place. The
yeah.
reason why is because they're transactional, completely transactional as to where, again, focus on value.
Hmm.
And when you're bringing value and you're nurturing those relationships, even people say, like, I've had people who've been like, nope, 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 nope. They're not buying from me, not buying from me because they love who they're dealing with. They love who they're dealing with. Everything is great. Then all of a sudden, completely out of their current provider's control, they just couldn't deliver this time. They couldn't deliver this time. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I got you. And we take care of it. Right. But next time, I'm actually the first person they're coming and talking to
Hmm.
because I've showed that incredible value and you've been ready and you've been
Yeah,
nurturing.
yeah. So I'm hearing a lot about relationships. Um, what do you do when someone's feeling stuck and they get into maybe a negative spiral where they're saying, the market is bad and I just lost this deal and I feel like quitting. How do you get someone back into positive attitude, doing the right things? How do you get how do you how can one even help themselves get out of a funk?
I think accountability is incredibly important. Right. I think that, and what I do is, again, I've built trust with my clients, right? Where they see that who I am is who I am. And so when I'm direct and honest with them, it's because I care about them, right? And I want to see them succeed. So sometimes it's just calling out the BS for what it is. Oh yeah, see, I can't like that the example I gave you before. I just don't have time. No, you don't make time. Stop saying you don't have time. All you have is time. You don't make it because you're prioritizing other things over this thing. So a level of accountability is incredibly important to help my clients get through what they're working on. So that's one, right? Call it for what it is. Stop making excuses for what it isn't. And then the second part is that belief. Along the way, I say this all the time. Kids, you have kids, and I know they're a little bit younger. Kids are fantastic. Kids don't understand failure. That's why kids get hurt all the time.
Mm.
My daughter was like, I think 4, fell down the stairs. She was reaching for the light switch, all the way down the stairs. She pops back up. Well, certainly faster, but I don't think I'll do that again. Right?
Yeah.
And she was fine to keep going up and down the stairs, didn't care. Because kids don't understand failure. But then over time, over years, we're taught to avoid failure and to avoid difficulties by like going to school and you're like, oh, you did this wrong. Next time, don't do that. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do this. Don't do that. And unprogramming that in our minds of like just embracing failure. So you talked about the hunting part of it. I tell people this all the time. I used to have to do 100 dials a day. There's one kind of career or phase of my career that I was in. I had to do 100 dials a day to hit the numbers I wanted to hit, right? I did the backwards math. In order to close, in order to make this much money, I had to do these many sales per month, which meant these many appointments per week, which meant these many calls per day. So it was 100 dials a day I had to do. And you celebrate every no. Thank God I got that no, right? Cool. That gets me one closer to the yes. And maybe you get one yes out
Mm-hmm.
of your 99 no's. But as you do it and as you kind of celebrate those, the more time goes on, you get a yes faster. Maybe it takes you 80 no's and then you get 70 no's. Why? Because you believe that the next call is probably going to be the yes because you're just celebrating the no anyway. Cool. Where you're out of the way, you're not the right one, and move on to the next one. So that's the other part of it is embracing the failure. Embracing the failure to understand that the failure is not a failure. It's not this one. The next one will be the right one, right? And identifying that quickly as well is like, what does that look like, and how do you move past her, or what are you celebrating when you find that customer that's not the right fit, or whatever the case might be, right?
Yeah. 100 dials a day. So accountability, belief. Um, so
Consistency.
tell me more about this, like celebrating the no. I'm one closer to the yes. I get it. I get it with 100 dials. You're just kind of moving through. But talk to me about rejection and fear of rejection, and how have you reprogrammed yourself to be comfortable to make offers even when there's no's, to dial even when there's a no? Was there something you uh did to make that more doable?
There's two sides, two main points on that. Is like, one is it's not you, right? I'm not rejecting you, Majeed, right? I'm maybe rejecting what you offered me, but that's not a personal thing. I don't dislike you, right? I don't have a problem with you. And so if I'm rejecting your offer, or you're rejecting my offer, I probably actually offered you the wrong thing, is the most likely piece, right? So that ties into the second part, which is, are you actually truly understanding what they need? This came with maturity. I got to say this, right? Like, to the really young salespeople, entrepreneurs, or when I say young, I don't mean by age, I mean like just getting going. This is one that came after a long time, is the understanding that it's important to spend more time up front to understand those needs and how to reframe it back to continue to check in. Okay, so what you're telling me is you need this, this, and this. So if I were able to deliver this, this, and this, would you be opposed to us working together? Right?
Mm,
And if they're like, uh, yeah, that's still not the right thing. Okay, what did I miss? Which part did I miss? And you can just keep going through this cycle, right? And as long as you're listening and you're genuinely trying to provide value, they'll keep giving you the information.
okay, I'm getting some good language here. I want to make sure I got it. So if I gave you this, and this, would you be opposed to us working together? That's an interesting way of saying it. Would you be opposed? Because they're either going to say, yes, I would still be opposed, or no, in this case means, yes, let's work together. And then what did I miss? I like that because it takes full responsibility. I must have missed something. That's the assumption is I must have missed something. So what did I miss? I like that.
So the first part of it, it's psychologically people want to say no. We've been programmed, right? More recently to want to say no to things. So if you can frame your question in a way that essentially gets them to say no, which is effectively a yes, right? So the same thing that I just asked you. So if I understood, if I deliver you X, Y, and Z, and it put together the solution that you were looking for, would you be opposed to working together? You naturally, I think that's why you caught it, you want to say no, right? Great. So since you're on board, I'm going to put together this package for you because by saying no, they actually said yes to what you're offering. But people naturally want to say no to things, especially when you see that person sitting there like this, right?
Uh-huh.
And you already know they're closed. You're like, okay, I understand. I can see how you are. I can see what you're delivering me. And so you can structure your question around a certain thing. And then that accountability, you're right, of going back and being like, what did I miss? Sometimes people will, again, when they take these things personally, when they take that rejection personally, they'll be like, but I don't understand. You said that you wanted X, Y, and Z, and I'm offering you X, Y, and Z. Why, like, why isn't this the right fit for you then? Now you're putting the other person on their defensive. As to where if you say, so I must have misunderstood something because you told me that if you could get X, Y, and Z, that you were ready to move forward. So was there something maybe that we didn't cover in that actually is also really important for you to make this decision?
Was there something that we didn't cover that's actually really important for you to make this decision? Cool. Cool. Let me ask you about metrics,
Mhm,
number, KPIs. You said you did the math and you determined that 100 dials will hit your goals.
mhm.
What are the metrics to measure that you found the most important, especially when you're coaching someone? What are you kind of guiding them to measure?
It's a great question. Because I deal with different types of clients, right? Some real estate agents, some investors, they're all going to have their own KPIs. And so one of the things that we do, it's actually one of the first steps that we take, right? When I'm going through kind of my initial discovery with them and our planning for what are we going to accomplish through our coaching is where do you need to be? So that's step one, right? Where do you need to be? What are your goals? I don't want to say what are your goals because goals can be whatever, right? Where do you need to be in 90 days?
Okay.
We could discover why aren't you there today?
Okay.
Okay. And then we work on a measurable plan. That's the part you're talking about, right? Those KPIs, those metrics, you have to be able to measure it. So if you're a real estate agent, you don't have enough leads. Okay. Where do those leads come from? Do you want inbound leads or do you need to increase your marketing? Do you need to increase your networking? Or are you going to have a door-to-door campaign? Right? Are you going to bring in someone who is going to actually do these direct dials for people? So, but we have to then understand, okay, so in order to hit that, what's your closing rate generally once you go and meet with someone? So when you go and meet with someone the first time, how many of those do you actually convert into listings? It's this. Okay. If the number is too low, we might work on why it's so low. But if it's a good number, okay, so let's do the backwards math of that. That means that you have to network with, if you get 30%, right? And your goal is to bring on 10 new clients a month, right? That means that you have to have 30, is that right? Yeah, 30 meetings per month.
Hmm.
And how many meetings do you get, or how many calls or dials do you get to get a meeting? 15? Cool, right? Now you start to see like how many you actually have. What's the activity that you have to do? So we create this plan around the metrics to it. And then we commit to the daily accountabilities. Okay, so what do you have to do on a day-to-day basis? That was that 100 dials a day. No matter what, I just had to do it. and it sucked some days, right? But you had to do it. You get up, you walk around the room. You know, at the time it wasn't even cell phones, really, it was like a headset. You're walking around the room because that motion creates emotion. I love that line from a movie. And so what are the daily steps you're going to take to get there? And then we review it and we renew it based on what are we seeing as results, right? What do we need to tweak? So over that 90 days that we're working together, these are all the steps we put in place to try to drive that success. But
Okay.
the metrics themselves that we measure are going to depend on what industry you're in and the results that you are looking for,
Yep.
and the audience that you're going after realistically.
Gotcha. So come up with a 90-day plan, figure out what the actual numbers are by doing, and then from real data, set targets.
Yep. And adjust, right? Something's not working because if you told me that your closing rate's 30%, but you're getting out there and you're having 10 meetings and closing one of them, something's not right.
Hmm.
So what is it that we need to adjust? Is your closing rate really 10%? Were you just never measuring before and you didn't know? Right? So if that's the case, guess what? We're going to increase your activity, right? Or can we work on that? Why are you not closing enough? What's
Hmm.
missing there? And so that's the review and kind of renew on the plan.
Mm-hmm. My very first coaching client ever, it's called Chris, financial advisor. And he played a game with himself. At the beginning of the day, he would take 100 pennies. And this is in Canada back when we had pennies. We don't have pennies anymore, but when I first came to Canada, we had pennies.
Yep.
And he would dump 100 pennies out and do his first dial, and then he would take a penny and put it in the cup.
Interesting.
Do the second dial, put the penny in the cup. And so his job from the moment he gets to work before his first cup of coffee is to get 100 pennies into the cup. And then he
Wow.
rewards himself with a cup of coffee, usually by 10 or 11 in the
That's
morning.
awesome.
And so he was asked by the national training to like train cold call because he was in the top 1% and he's getting all of his stuff from cold calls. And he called me up and he was like, Majeed, I don't know what to tell them. I just put the pennies in the cup. He just made it so simple
Yeah.
because he doesn't have a script, he doesn't have a strategy, he doesn't have a mindset game or whatever. He's just like, I just decided that's what I'm gonna do.
Just did the work.
I've always admired people like that because I'm one of those guys, I gotta have my coffee just right. I gotta do my little, set the mood, burn some incense, get a little distracted.
Yeah,
Maybe I
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
check all my emails first, and then it's 5 o'clock. you know, I don't have that kind of discipline. What works for me is I have people schedule calls into my calendar. So I wake up in the morning and go, oh, I got a bunch of sales calls today. Great. The marketing's working. Right. But if I had to just stare at a blank calendar and a list and a phone, that would take some discipline that I feel like I'm not in possession of right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I love about your story about that guy with his 100 pennies? Do you know what probably put him in the top 1%?
Tell me.
That he put 100 pennies in a cup every single day,
That's it.
right? Like, if you look at an athlete, basketball player, Steph Curry, greatest shooter of all time, no one really argues with that. Why? Dude puts up like hundreds of shots every single day. Every single day. It's going to make him better. It's unavoidable. It's completely unavoidable that if you do 100 dials a day, you're just gonna get better at it. Why? Because if you ever listen, you've done some coaching. Have you ever actually coached someone doing cold calling? Man, sorry,
I
I was
don't
gonna
think
jump
so.
ahead of it.
I don't think
No.
so. Mm-mm.
So the first call, people are nervous. So, hi, it's Fernando calling, and there's nothing there. By the 100th call that same day, hey, it's Fernando calling. I just wanted to chat with you about whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've done it so many times that it's like this muscle and they can just get through it. So what happens is that's why I was saying that first day you maybe get one close because you were nervous for the first 40 calls. You started to get easy. By the 100th call, you were like relaxed. The next day you come back, you're still nervous for the first few because like, I can't believe I'm doing this again. By the 100th, you're totally relaxed. You keep doing this every single day. The first call you pick up that one day, you're completely relaxed. Hey, how's it going? Right? And you're just in a conversation with the person. And that energy, that confidence, that calm really attracts people to you. They believe what you're saying now. Not that you are lying to them or anything like that, but like they believe that you're confident in what you're calling them about. You are an expert. That builds confidence with someone you've never spoken to before. And so that repetition of just doing those dials, having those calls, celebrating those no's, that's what puts you in the top 1%. It's that simple. Like people think it's something crazy, like, oh, it must be like, ultra sales per. No, there's not. He's just doing it and getting better at it. And he's unrelenting in filling his cup with pennies.
Mhm. I'll share with you something that was helpful for me. There was a book I listened to several times called Prosperity Consciousness,
Mm.
like one of these old kind of 1970s old school language stuff. And the guy said, he didn't realize this, but he somehow had this unconscious belief that his presence was not appreciated by people,
Hmm.
right? And he would go to parties and he would find like nobody's interesting, nobody's friendly, right?
Right.
He started to reprogram himself. He started to reprogram himself with this belief that people like my company.
Mm.
Okay. Then the next time he goes to a party, he has that same thought, nobody's interesting here, nobody's friendly. And then he remembered, people like my company.
Yeah.
And then he started introducing himself. And then he found that he happened to be in the party with the nicest, most interesting people he's ever met, right? Just from changing his own mindset.
Yeah.
And for me at the time, I remember I was in charge of doing IT sales for federal government. I had a list and I did everything I could to avoid. I went to the coffee machine 3 times a day just to avoid the pain of, oh my God, someone's going to hang up on me or someone's going to say,
Right.
stop bothering me. And then I remembered I could change my belief about this call. And I noticed even in my own language, I was saying, sorry to bother you. I hope this isn't a bad time.
Right.
I'll just take a minute. I changed my belief to I'm like sunshine coming through the phone. I'm gonna brighten their day. And then I started
Yep.
feeling like it's not hard to make a call when my intention is I'm gonna bring them happiness and joy through the phone. So uh you asked me if I've coached anybody on cold calling. I have coached people on the belief that like a phone call from you is going to be the highlight of their day. A
Yeah.
phone call from you can be really joyful.
Yeah. If that's what you bring,
Yeah.
right? I've had a real estate client that I've worked with, real estate agent client that I've worked with. That they're like, oh, I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like people are just, I don't know if they want to work with me. I'm like, do you believe in what you do? One of the first questions I asked, do you believe in what you do? Well, yeah.
Mm,
Are you good at what you do? Well, I think so. Okay. So do you believe that you bring people value? If you had a family member that reached out to you, would you be like, I need to be the one to help you because I'm good at this. And I know that like I care about you and I'm gonna do the best job for you. You'd want that, right? So that means that you believe that you provide value. Well, yeah, I provide value. Great. So why are you holding that value back from other people? Right. And that's where the mindset piece comes in is like understanding like I have value and you're not asking someone to work with you, you're offering to share that value with them. You're
mhm,
helping them, you're offering to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve. I don't care what you're selling. If you're calling someone, unless someone gave you some kind of crazy list that had no business being part of what you're supposed to be dialing, which is very unlikely, right? Um, you're calling people that actually need what you're offering,
mhm,
or you wouldn't be calling them. So you have to stop looking at it as like, oh God, I really hope they buy from me. Like, I really hope I can deliver them some value. I hope I can be the one to bring them what they need. It's such a
mhm,
different piece up here, right? But you have to start looking at it as like, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm offering you something. And most salespeople, what they do is they think they're asking for a close. No, I'm offering to help solve the problem that you need to solve anyways. Part of your job is to procure whatever computer screen since we're sitting in front of him, right? Like Your job as this buyer is to procure computer screens. I sell computer screens. I'm offering to make your job easier by checking
Yeah.
all the boxes that you told me you need to check. Does this sound good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And as opposed to, oh man, can you please just buy these from me? It's like the sales guy on The Simpsons is always the one that I think to. I don't know if you ever watched The Simpsons. The one who's like at the end of the month, oh come on, can you please just help me out? And he's begging for this. No one wants to buy from that person. Nobody. They want to buy from the person that they think is actually delivering them value and
Mm,
helping them. And
yeah.
is that expert they can go to and they're like, I was asked to do this thing and now I don't know what to do or what I need. Hey, can you help me out? Absolutely. Let me do the work for you. I'll find it, what it is, and I'll bring it to you. Great,
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Great. We've covered a lot. Mindset, attitude, metrics, how we think about money.
Yeah.
Going from poor, we don't talk about money, to rich, we are happy to talk about money.
Yeah.
To the discipline of the 100 dials, doing what needs to be done. Fernando, how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to hire you or like to learn from you? Where can they find you?
For right now, probably the best place is on Instagram. It's where I'm most active, right? I'm on all the social channels, but at FN Good. So at FN Good. Uh, because it's Fernando Nunes. Life is good, right? So I like to share that. I'm on Facebook as well and LinkedIn, of course. But Instagram is probably the best way.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Majeed, I want to thank you actually for having me on, man. This is awesome. I love chatting with you, and I love the energy and positivity that you bring as well. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right,
Received.
thanks.